Chapter 99, A Villain's Perks. Who are you? Maxen frowned at the first question she had for him after not talking for months. Only 2 months and 2 days, Cozy, and now you can't remember me, he repeated in a somber tone. Cosette gasped and blinked countless times. The more she stared, the more he looked familiar. Out of panic, Cosette jumped and plopped her butt down beside him. Max, she exclaimed, making him wince and tug his earlobe. OMG. Unbothered by the slight annoyance dominating his face, Cosette cupped his cheeks and forced him to look back at her. Her eyes scanned his face, gasping dramatically. What? He asked, annoyed at this strange reaction from her. Your fats, came out a shaking voice on the verge of crying, looking back at him with a deep frown. Where did your baby fats go? His frown deepened, scrunching his nose up in dismay. My cute baby villain, Omo, did you starve yourself while I was busy, she asked worriedly. Oh gosh, don't worry, I will feed you tons and tons of food. Maxen would be pleased with everything she had spewed recklessly, if not for the fact she was acting like a grandma, concerned with her favorite grandchild's well-being. He looked at her dead in the eye, sighing faintly at the sight of her. He raised his hand and pinched her cheek mildly. I missed you, he said without a second hesitation, stopping her from her continuous histrionic sentiments. Ah, she blinked twice, her hands still cupping his face. You've been busy, he stressed, and we didn't hang out that much, that's why I missed you. Later. It took Cosette some time to absorb the words he uttered, and when they registered in her head, her face slowly turned red. She even heard her head producing a puff sound when her brain overheated, making her dizzy for a moment. Seeing her flustered reaction, Maxen chuckled with his lips closed. But alas, she purposely misunderstood his chuckle as him being evil and deliberately making her feel a little embarrassed. She clicked her tongue, retracting her hand from his face. Gosh, just because you look a little mature now, you think you can seduce this innocent maiden. Seduce an innocent maiden? He arched a brow and tilted his head to the side. I'm not seducing you, you and I are too young for that. Yes, you are, her breath hitched, jumping back while pointing at him with judgmental eyes. How? That, he flinched when she exclaimed one more time. What? The confusion in his eyes grew even more apparent, knowing he was innocent. A bit. It wasn't like Maxen was purposely seducing her, but it wasn't like he was completely innocent either, since there were certain things he wanted to do to her or with her. For instance, kissing. Yes, you looking at me as if I'm your prey is seduction without a doubt, she clarified, looking back at him cautiously. It wasn't just Maxen losing a bit of weight, but for some reason, his entire features looked more mature, like Asher's. Was that even possible? How could his appearance change so drastically in 2 months? Was this part of the novel's character development, a villain's perks or some sort? It wasn't like he changed completely, but more like since his baby fats were gone, his face and Adam's apple looked more defined. Hence, his handsomeness, which she wanted to keep for herself, was now out there for everyone to see. Just how would she protect Maxen, or the girls who would experience his wrath once they pissed him off? While Cosette gave him this inexplicably complicated look, Maxen cocked his head to the side. He had been working out even before she thought of tagging along with her father. Still, he could barely see any results. Although he felt light and some of his clothes were bigger now, he didn't go under the knife to change his appearance. And yet, she was acting like he had surgery to fix his face. If not for the unreasonable accusations she was throwing at him, he would take it as a compliment. However, she was glaring daggers at him as if he was a criminal. What am I going to do with you? He mumbled and sighed, shaking his head mildly. I can't believe this is what you are so concerned about. He cocked his head towards the couch across from them, where she was lazing around previously. Go back and read whatever you are reading. What? She sprawled her arms and grabbed his wrist on instinct, just in case he would leave. He didn't plan to, though, so his brows rose at her abrupt hold. For a moment, they looked at each other blankly, blinking silently. What? He asked, breaking the prolonged silence. What do you mean what? I'm stopping you from leaving, just in case you'll walk out like you always do. Another faint exhale slipped past his nose. I thought you'd be more mature after all that in your company. Maxen raised a finger and poked her forehead mildly. Turns out you've become more silly. Her frown deepened. That's because I thought you've grown more distant after not seeing me. Distant? Didn't you ask who I was just now? But that's because your cuteness is gone, she pouted, clicking her tongue. You don't understand, whatever. Cosette slapped his finger away mildly and turned around, folding her arms under her chest. Seeing her action, Maxen tilted his head to the side. "What do you mean by that?" he asked out of pure curiosity, but she only answered with a loud HMP. Maxen wouldn't understand her dilemma if she wouldn't tell him. While he was wondering what could be her problem, Cosette snapped her tongue once more. "Who gave him permission to grow up so fast?" she grumbled inwardly. "I mean, of course, I will barely recognize him with how much weight he lost. Also, this is a sin. How can he be so handsome? Just when I thought I already managed my feelings, so frustrating." Cosette was aware her problems were merely childish tantrums that she could resolve if she wanted to. However, it was upsetting when she thought she could be okay, but Maxen would spew nonsense to tease her. Her maiden heart was weak. "Did you really miss me?" she murmured after a minute of silence, sneaking a look at him. After all that dramatic inner tantrum, her emotions still boiled down to what was important, the truth. Maxen looked at her cautious eyes and nodded lightly, showing zero hesitation in expressing his feelings. "I did, and I'm glad to see you lazing around here like a sloth." His lips curled up subtly, making her breath hitch and dyeing her face red. "My heart," she mentally placed her hand across her chest to calm her racing heart. Surely Maxen matured not just in appearance, but in demeanor as well. Just months ago, Maxen would always click his tongue at her or frown. No, actually, Maxen never smiled at her, but now, he was smiling so gently. "This is the first," she whispered, watching his brows raise. Her lips stretched wider until they reached her eyes. "This is the first time I saw you smile candidly, Max. It seemed you really have a great summer." His smile line faded, replaced by a blissful nonchalance. Did you enjoy yours?" Very much." Cosette leaned back, hugging the pillow and bending her knees closer to her chest. She glanced at him once again and bit her lips to stop them from stretching like a fool. "Although I missed you," came out a muffled confession, "just as much." His eyes softened at her remarks, rocking his head mildly. During this summer, Maxen realized one thing, and that was Cosette was very expressive. Her words could be easily misunderstood, just like this one, for instance. If this was before, Maxen would think it was some sort of love confession. However, now he knew this wasn't the case. After all, people could miss other people in their life, not just their lovers. Although he didn't plan to stay as friends in the future, he was satisfied with this level of closeness for now. "Why didn't you grow cozy?" he asked, reaching for her hair only to ruffle it playfully. "Or were you shrinking?" She frowned. "No, you just grew overnight. This is so unfair." "Is it?" he laughed, making her even more irritable as she slapped his hand away. "Maxen, there are a lot of things I want to ask you, and the first of them is how dare you?" she huffed, hopping out of the couch to stand in front of him. She raised her chin, hands on her hips, sporting this fake bravado to conceal the natural blush on her face. "I might have not grown taller, but can't you see I have a body of a woman?" she argued, staring down at him, who was leaning back with his arms spread. From her point of view, Maxen's lazy posture was akin to a prince waiting for someone to straddle him. Meanwhile, Maxen kept his eyes locked with hers before his gaze fell on her neck, down to her slender shoulders, then collarbones. His gaze continued to move south ever so slowly until he was staring at her legs. Cosette was wearing a short and a sleeveless top, making his throat bob. Why does she always put me in a very awkward situation? He wondered with a deep sigh, raising his eyes to meet her eyes, only to see her look away in embarrassment. That's right. She finally realizes how awkward this is for the both of us, but she is stubborn and won't admit that. Seriously, she's going to drive me crazy again. Chapter 100, Plans for the Night. Cosette pursed her lips into a thin line and cleared her throat. She scratched her nape, sitting down beside Maxen with her chin raised. "Since when did you look this sexy?" she mumbled, making the corner of his lips stretch. "It's inborn." Her frown deepened, glaring at him in dismay. "And since when did you become so shameless?" "I've always been shameless," he shrugged nonchalantly. "I wouldn't live in here if I have some sense of pride in me, don't you think?" Cosette folded her arms under her chest and tossed her back against the pillow behind her. "This is not good." "Why not?" "I miss my cute Maxen." Cute, he arched a brow, already used to her honesty. Sometimes he wondered if Cosette was just foolishly honest. But after sharing a good amount of time with her, Cosette was only 100% transparent to him. Not that she was a liar, but there were certain things she usually kept to herself when she knew it would help no one. Her frown remained, looking away from him to hide the natural blush dominating her face. "You were so cute back then." "Do you like chubby men?" "Chubby or skinny, I don't care. That's not how I base my preference, she answered internally but bit her tongue from saying that aloud. Psst, Maxen whistled to get her attention, leaning forward to tap her shoulder. I won't ask any more, but don't ignore me. Ignoring you. He frowned, arching a brow. He lowered his eyes and smirked, raising a finger to poke the side of her stomach. As soon as he did, her shoulders jumped, and she looked back at him, wide-eyed. Still ignoring me, he cocked his head to the side, enjoying how the pink blush on her face slowly turned red. When she didn't answer after 10 seconds, he poked her side once again, which made her jolt back. Max, she gasped in horror while he chuckled. You. Cosette balled her hand into a tight fist, grinding her teeth. It had only been 2 months since their last bonding time, but Maxen surely changed. Although she was glad to see him smiling and laughing more, he also became mischievous. So this is what you want, huh? She snorted, cracking her fingers before pouncing on him. Without a moment's notice, she bit his shoulder like a dog while he wiggled under her. Maxen tapped her back, signaling her to stop biting. But alas, the second Cosette let him go, his fingers were already on standby to tickle her. Max, stop. Cosette writhed on the couch like a worm, kicking him, but he was strong. Maxen held her ankle securely, tickling her soul until she was crying. Please. Pleased, Maxen let her go. As soon as he did, Cosette rested her feet on his lap. She was panting for air, clearing her throat, catching up to her breathing. Seeing her recovery, Maxen gazed down at her feet. His hand reached for her ankle, only for it to get kicked away. No more, Max, she complained. I'm already dying here. I just want to massage your feet. No, don't you dare. Cosette glared at him and pointed a finger. No more. But I'm telling the truth. No, she huffed and only relaxed when he raised his hands. Gosh, my side hurts. Maxen leaned back and kept his attention on her, smiling subtly. While staring at her, he couldn't help but be amazed at how they treated each other, as if they were seeing each other for the past 2 months. It was almost the same, or rather even better. His eyes softened. The therapy worked, I guess. Maxen did not only enroll in different classes to gain some skills he might use for his future, but also, since he had more than enough, he also went to regular therapy for his mental health. He knew he had problems regarding trust issues and abandonment. The reason he couldn't fully open up to people was because of those factors. But who would have thought those therapies would actually help him get by day? Although he was still a work in progress, he was glad that he invested in himself, because if he didn't, his relationship with her would stay the same. Not that Cosette needed to do something, since she was still treating him the same as before, but more like, for the first time. He also took a step closer to her. Max, his brows rose, snapping out of his trance when she called. Why didn't you tell me about your certification? Cosette tilted her head until her eyes could see him properly. Maxen was still sitting on his spot previously, while she was lying on the couch with her feet on top of his lap. Isn't today your graduation day? She explained in a questioning tone. You should have told me, since this is an achievement we should celebrate. What graduation? I just collected a piece of paper, just like how we do our clearance at the end of the school year. There's no ceremony whatsoever. Really? She scrunched her nose up while he nodded. But still, we should celebrate it, right? Cosette propped her elbows against the cushion to sit upright. Her feet stayed on his lap, his arm over them. What do you want to do? She asked with anticipation in her eyes. Should we have a special dinner with my dad? Or should we eat out? How about we go on a day trip? But Papa is busy this entire week. She frowned, mulling about their plan on how to celebrate their small win. There were many options, but considering there was only a week before the school start, they couldn't go YOLO, so their options gradually decreased. We don't need to. He trailed off when she glared at him as if she would kill him if he said another word. Honestly, I don't need to celebrate anything, but why is she so invested in it? Just then, Maxen recalled one of his therapy sessions regarding giving more credit to himself and something about self-love. He looked at her, blinking twice, studying her solemn expression. How about? He cleared his throat when she raised her attention to him again. Even though he didn't plan on rejecting her suggestion, he still felt like he had to choose his words carefully. Surely, she could be very intense and scary at times. I mean, we can celebrate it by watching a movie and some snacks. He shrugged. Going out is tiring, but we can just do that here. Or a swim, I guess. Oh, she rocked her head. Just the two of us. Do you plan on throwing a party? He arched a brow. No, but I mean, you might want more people. Just you? He stopped her even before she could finish her ridiculous assumption. Her brows rose while looking back at his indifferent expression. I just want to celebrate it with you, just you. There's no way I'll tell her she should invite that brat here. He could not help but click his tongue inwardly, thinking that their classmates would surely snatch Cosette's attention. If this was about celebrating his certification, then he would rather have to spend time with her alone. After all, Cosette was the only person who mattered to him. All right, she nodded, biting her inner lip to suppress her giggle, but to no avail. Feels like a date. This time his back stiffened and looked at her. His throat bobbed nervously, seeing the devious curl of the corner of her lips. I like her, but sometimes she scares me, he sighed, shaking his head. I sometimes feel unsafe around her, more than the fact that she should be the one worrying. Let's go, Maxen flinched when she sprung out of the bed excitedly. Let's go, he asked. Yes, we'll have a movie night now, she nodded profusely, hands on her hips. I'll make some popcorn and snacks, you help me set up the entertainment room. Cosette arched a brow when Maxen didn't move an inch from his spot. Hence, she kicked his foot lightly, only for him to sigh. Okay, Maxen dragged himself out of the cough lazily until he was standing in his statue. Meanwhile, her eyes dilated slowly, looking up at him in horror. What now? He asked, seeing how she looked at him as if she has just seen a ghost. Max, she yelled, grabbing either his biceps. How come you grew this tall? Huh? What do you mean, huh? How the hell did you grow so tall like a tower? What sort of sorcery is this? She gasped in disbelief. She was already surprised at Maxen's changes in his overall physique, but even his height. If she was correct, Maxen was now at least an inch taller than Asher, or at least the same height. I don't know, he shrugged. Are we not watching anymore now? No, we'll watch, Cosette snapped her tongue in irritation. You really know how to set me straight. Maxen simply chuckled as she stomped her feet away, but just as he took a step to follow her, he stopped when he caught her phone lighting up from the corner of his eyes. Knowing she would turn the house upside down later if she remembered her phone, Maxen picked it up to give it to her. But as he did, he caught the novel she was reading when he came in. His brows furrowed, pressing the back button only to see a lewd cover of both men. Chapter 101, Jealous. The Blac residence was a huge property with complete amenities seen in luxury establishments. When Cosette went to make some snacks, refusing everyone's helping hand, Maxen dragged his feet towards the theatre room to set up nothing. The servants cleaned every corner and room of the mansion. Therefore, he just had to sit down leisurely and overthink Cosette's dangerous hobby. Even when she arrived, and they both chose a horror film, his concern for her continuously increased. Maxen was just sitting at arm's length in the middle of the long couch. His eyes were fixed on the enormous television, bearing an utterly solemn countenance. His mind, however, was drifting about something else. Why is she so into those kinds of stories? He asked himself for the umpteenth time, remembering how she was giggling and squealing earlier. Does she need therapy for this too? A deep exhale escaped his nostrils, massaging his brows. Little did he know, Cosette had noticed how distracted he was. Initially, she thought the reason Maxen wore that straight face despite the jump scare was that it didn't terrify him. But the more she observed him through the corner of her eyes, she was convinced that wasn't the case. Everything good? She asked, watching him arch a brow and cast her a look. The second their eyes locked with each other, she couldn't help but gulp down the popcorn she was chewing. Perhaps because they didn't see each other that much in the past 2 months that she wasn't used to how defined his facial features were now, especially that sharp jaw. I guess, he answered under his breath, failing to notice the attentiveness in her eyes. You guess, despite the distraction, Cosette managed to stay on the subject. Where is that uncertainty coming from? Cosette blinked twice before her brows knitted. Maxen didn't answer immediately and just stared at her in silence, making her slightly self-conscious. What, Max? She asked one more time. Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something wrong with my face? Nothing, he shook his head, snapping his eyes. Forget it. She frowned, stretching her legs until her feet were over his lap. Unfortunately, that only increased my interest. It's nothing, really. It's something, she argued, raising both her brows. Come on, Max, tell me. We're watching a movie. I can rewatch it again in my free time. She shrugged. I can't return the time that had already gone by. I'd rather spend it listening to you than watch. Cosette's expression bore innocence, not trying to sound romantic, but still tugged his heartstrings. Maxen let out a shallow breath, cursing himself for letting her notice. What was he supposed to tell her now? That he saw what she was reading and he had been concerned since. Not that he considered she would be upset and misunderstand that he was invading her privacy, but she might feel embarrassed. Don't you ever lie to me, she warned when his lips parted, narrowing her eyes as if reading what he was planning. Just tell me it's something you can't share with me, then I will stop pressing about it. Just don't lie to me. I sort of hate being kept in the dark for some reason. Maxen studied her countenance for a moment and sighed. Fine. He then picked up her phone from the back pockets of his jeans, tossing it to her side. Her brows furrowed upon recognizing the phone case, raising her eyes full of genuine wonder back at him. Even before he could start his explanation, she held her breath as her heart thudded. I didn't mean to peek, but before coming in here I noticed it in the lobby. Knowing you will turn the house upside down while looking for it, I picked it up to give it to you, but I accidentally tapped the back arrow button and… Maxen's face heat up, a little embarrassed as if he caught her showering. He cleared his throat, trying to muster his courage to continue. But I saw the cover of the novel you were reading. He lowered his eyes, recalling the horror when he saw the cover that appeared as if it had something to do with BDSM. I knew it, horror dominated her face at the thought, eyes blank but still on Maxen. Is he scared of me now? Not that Cosette was embarrassed about reading boys' love. Actually, she loved them and was a proud fan of the genre. Especially the smut was mostly better than straight romance. The only reason she was horrified was that Maxen was often overwhelmed with the idea and might think of her as strange. Max, she called awkwardly, thinking of how to salvage this situation. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm not against men being with men, but I don't want them displaying their affection right in front of my face. He explained his side of the story just to make her less uncomfortable, but I've never seen a girl like that type of story in her free time. But you never knew a lot of ladies, Max, she blurted out, causing pin-drop silence in the room. I mean, you don't even bother with other people, so of course you don't know, but that doesn't mean this is abnormal. Huh. Our classmates like this type of story, she exclaimed, using what she previously blurted out accidentally to her advantage. That's why they sometimes ship you and Luke, remember. Also, some of them actually think you look great with Ash. What? Maxen scrunched his nose up in dismay, unable to comprehend how the hell was he being tied with those Quinn brothers. Also, did she just call Asher Ash? Unaware of his muddled thoughts, Cosette pressed her lips into a thin line. I mean, it's just them. Are you close with Luke's brother now? He asked, ignoring their initial subject, as this one was way more important. I heard from Sir Conrad that you had a current joint project with the Quinn Holdings, so I sort of knew you had met him a few times. Was he your friend now too? What? Cosette knitted her brows, taking her time from this sudden transition in their discussion. Why do I feel like a wife getting caught red-handed by my husband? She studied Maxen's expression and tilted her head to the side. He didn't seem angry or aggressive. If anything, all she saw in his eyes was plain curiosity. How upsetting. It's not like we've grown close or something like that, but since we're both involved in the project, it's better to maintain a friendly and professional relationship with the Quinns, she explained, choosing her wording carefully because of lingering nervousness she didn't know where it was coming from. Why? She asked this time, weighing if she should continue this discussion or just move on. In the end, Cosette was a bit upset he didn't have any strong reaction to her ambiguous relationship with Asher, so she chose to continue. Why do you want to know about my relationship with Asher? She asked. Well, curious. I see, she rocked her head, biting her inner lip. Just then, a memory crossed her head, making her raise a brow slightly. He actually wants me to date him. Cosette studied Maxen, anticipating any reaction from him but to no avail. Maxen simply froze, but not enough for her to notice. But he managed to keep his composure, only to let out an indifferent, "Oh." "Oh," she frowned slightly. What did I expect? I refused him, though. She shrugged, huffing faintly to release the slight frustration at his lack of reaction, but he told me he will try. Do you like him? He asked without beating around the bush. Well, he isn't that bad in my opinion. He is handsome, smart, decisive, and a complete package. Cosette simply stated the obvious, although she didn't have the slightest desire to date the male lead of this story. He might be a little arrogant, but he's still young and he will eventually, Max, you'll break my ankle if you hold it that tight. Maxen released her ankle immediately when she pointed out how his grip was tightening. Sorry, was trying to massage it. Oh, she nodded in understanding and then continued. Should I date him? What do you think? Why are you asking me? He returned almost sarcastically. Will you not date him if I said no? Will you say no? Maxen narrowed his eyes to hide the dangerous glint that flickered across them. Don't date him. Why? She cocked her head, jealous. What if I am? This time, Cosette took a moment to answer. She studied him for a second before placing the bowl of popcorn on the table in front of them. She then dragged her rear closer to him, without moving her feet from his lap. "You're really jealous?" she asked with anticipation when she was a few closer to him. Her lips stretched from side to side, wanting to see him up close to see the truth, even if he lay on the skin of his teeth. Maxen fluttered his eyelashes ever so tenderly, realizing she used Asher as bait to get a reaction from him. But he didn't feel manipulated since he barely showed emotion, as if he had seen it coming. "Yes," he replied under his breath, raising a hand to play with the tip of her hair. "If you date him, I'll date someone else, maybe, fuck her too while I'm at it." Chapter 102, I did a good job. If you date him, I'll date someone else, maybe, fuck her too while I'm at it. Maxen kept his straight face, looking at Cosette dead in the eye. He was serious, and he wanted her to know that. "If you need my opinion, my answer will always be the same. Don't date anyone," he repeated solemnly. "But if you don't need it, do what you want to do. Date whoever you wanted. It's your life and your decision." Silence instantly befell the two of them, looking at each other in silence. Cosette bit her tongue, finding her lost voice. "If I date, you will also date?" she asked for clarification. "I will if I feel like it. Don't think it was because of you. No, it's not. I just think there's no reason for me to keep holding on to someone who is happier with another person," he explained, trying his best to keep it as simple and clear. Although what he wanted to tell her was her happiness was his priority, and even if he wasn't in that happiness, he would be happy, but obviously he wasn't ready to say all those cheesy lines. Cosette pressed her lips into a thin line while holding his gaze. His answer left a bitter taste in her mouth. Of course, she understood Maxen, or rather, she had a different interpretation of his answer. What she understood was that Maxen wouldn't stop her from dating or anything of the sort, and that also meant she had no say if he also started dating. She even forgot the shock his initial answer gave her, as she didn't expect something so vulgar. He sounded a bit sexy in her rotten ears, though. "Kay," came out a short reply, twisting her body until she was facing the television once again. When her eyes landed on the movie, Cosette didn't understand what was going on anymore, but she didn't have the energy to rewind it. "Why are you upset?" he inquired this time, almost knowing her from inside and out. She didn't do anything grand, but her short reply, followed by silence, was enough for him to understand she was upset. "I'm not upset," she murmured, casting him a cursory look, only to see him raise his brows. Another deep exhale slipped past her lips, smacking them right after. "It's just, I don't want you to date," she confessed, expressing her heart as honestly as ever, a habit that had always tugged his heartstrings and nearly pushed him to insanity. "Of course, if you find someone who will make you happy, I'll be happy too, but the thought of it now, this might sound selfish, but I don't want Maxen to date someone else for now," she continued, almost pouting. It was almost like how a mother would refuse her child to date. That was where Cosette believed this feeling was coming from. Maxen was her baby villain, and the thought of him dating a girl at such a young age brought this mixed emotion to her heart. "But then again, no matter how I deny it, I know for you there will never be the right time where I can say I'm ready to let him go," her brain told her, forcing her to face her hypocritical opinions. "Just what am I doing? Seriously." "All of that is hypothetical." Maxen let out a helpless sigh as he planted a palm on top of her head. "Don't be upset about something that hasn't happened yet." Cosette looked up at him, still frowning. "Did you also age 10 years in the past 2 months? You sound like a real adult now." "Age isn't the indicator of maturity," he shrugged. "Experience is." "I know," she pouted, keeping her eyes at his gentle eyes. "Stop looking at me like I am your little sister. I'm not. I'm not looking at you like my little sister." "You are," she rolled her eyes, brushing his hand away from her head. Cosette clicked her tongue, studying him for a moment before clicking her tongue once more. She wasn't wrong with her assumption. Maxen was starting to treat her like a little girl, just like Conrad. That was cute before, but after her experience in the BLK Corporation, Cosette unconsciously wanted to be treated like a woman, and to be looked at as a woman, particularly in Maxen's eyes. The only person she didn't mind who would look at her like a little girl was Conrad. "I'm not your little sister, Max. If you keep treating me like one, you'll regret it," she warned, but her tone sounded even lazier. "That's for sure." Maxen frowned while his brows rose. Why was she assuming he was treating her like a little girl? Was she out of her mind? Or Cosette was simply playing dumb about his feelings? He blinked his eyes, watching her refocus her eyes on the movie in front of them. Cosette was still mumbling things, reaching for the remote control to rewind, where she was before getting distracted by him. So she's not faking it, he told himself, furrowing his brows, but I don't really see her as a sister since I have some fantasies about her. Maxen looked away when his deepest secret resurfaced in his head. Little did he know, the only reason Cosette was forced into this assumption was that Maxen looked at her the same way Conrad looked at her. Not that he was purposely doing it, but Maxen had only seen pure love between Cosette and Conrad. All relationships Maxen had seen were either with benefits, or like a couple who wouldn't stop fighting, just like how it was like in his home before he ran away years ago. In other words, Conrad's way of showing his love to his daughter sort of rubbed off on him. While she was rewinding the film and Maxen was deep in his thoughts, he casually sprawled his arm across the backrest of the couch and then massaged her scalp. His action instantly sent a ticklish sensation under her skin, looking at him only to realize he was doing it subconsciously. She let him massage her scalp with his fingertips, eyes still on his side profile. From this close distance, Maxen surely retained his original features. It was just that the extra fats disappeared. Not that he looked like he truly starved himself, but even without touching his muscles, they already looked taut from regular exercise. "Max, what sort of classes did you enroll in?" she asked, catching his attention when her eyes felt full from ogling at the beauty he hid from everyone. Her question brought him back from his trance, snapping his eyes and twisting his neck to face her. "Huh. I was asking what sort of classes did you enroll in," she repeated patiently, once again distracted from the movie. They wouldn't finish it at this point. "A lot." His answer was short, and his eyes studied the genuine curiosity in her eyes. "One of them is martial arts and then art class." "Really?" "MHM," he nodded. "I also did some therapy, and the doctor suggested art so I can express myself." Her lips curled up, proud at hearing what he had done, although he didn't detail it. That much was enough for her to understand that Maxen did not only enroll in short classes to kill time, but to improve himself. "Did you at least enjoy them?" she inquired, and he answered with a nod. "That's good then." Cosette heaved a sigh of relief, smiling with satisfaction. But before she could think of anything grand, Maxen spoke once more. "My coach told me he likes me and made me start with yellow." "Really?" Her eyes widened. "Hey, are you really training in a legitimate dojo? How can he give you yellow for starters?" "Yeah, I started with yellow and now I'm orange." He shrugged, enjoying how her eyes widened even more. Wait. Cosette waved profusely, adjusting in her seat until she was facing him again with her feet up. "Max, that is impossible. I'm starting to question this dojo and this master who is training you. You can't just start with yellow and then get orange in 2 months." "Why not?" he frowned. "Because it takes years for that. I mean, it took me a decade to become a black belter. Some need at least more months to get promoted to green. Are you being scammed or what?" she gasped, a little more worried now. "How did that even happen?" Maxen blinked twice, misplaced innocence in his eyes. "I beat the hell out of his protégé." And Cosette looked at him with furrowed brows. "What?" "I beat the hell out of the top student who was already a black belter. So the master took a liking to me and allowed me to skip a few colors, for the safety of those children." All she could do was stare at him in silence, scanning his straight face to find the slightest deception, but to no avail. Just then she realized that was because Maxen was a delinquent in the past, not to mention the hard labor he had as a part-time, so his foundation was solid, unlike Cosette, who started at a very young age. "Right," she murmured, creasing her brows upon noticing the look he was giving her. "What?" "I did a good job," he explained. "Yes, you did. I'm proud of you." "Oh, Maxen." "What, Cosette?" The two looked at each other with question marks hovering over her head, while Maxen looked at her as if he was waiting for something. As the staring competition prolonged, Maxen tapped his cheek. "Reward," he explained, as it seemed she had forgotten how she gave out rewards. "Did you forget?" Chapter 103, She Also Need a Reward. "Did you forget?" Maxen tapped his cheek with his index, a misplaced innocence dominating his face. Cosette blinked multiple times, remembering the same excuse before during their trip to the Quins' vacation home. "Oh," she bit her tongue to stop herself from grinning from ear to ear. Hee Tilda, what a treat." Cosette raised her chin and cleared her throat, keeping her dignity as she leaned forward. She couldn't sell herself out now, could she? She puckered her lips and planted a brief peck on his cheek, making his lips curl up subtly in satisfaction. "Good job, Max," she expressed sincerely as she drew away, watching him turn his head to face her. Without noticing it, their faces only had a palm-length distance. Perhaps it was because they were too comfortable with each other, or they were simply happy reuniting. That awkwardness was absent from the room. His lips curled up even more until his beautiful grey eyes were slightly squinting charmingly. "You too," he replied, ruffling her hair mildly. "Good job of doing well in your company." "Gosh," she giggled, raising her brows when his eyes fell on her lips. Her throat instantly bobbed, feeling his gaze on her lips. "Will he kiss me?" she wondered, pursing her lips into a thin line as if to hide them. Not that she didn't want to, but she felt a bit shy. Her face was already dyed in red and her breathing slowed down. She could hear her heart drumming in her ears the longer he stared at her lips. "Maxen," she called under her breath when she couldn't take his silence anymore. "My eyes are up here." "I know," he replied lazily. "Just nothing." Maxen shrugged and cleared his throat, leaning back. For a moment there he was debating whether to kiss her or not. He nearly did, especially with the thought of Asha butting in and showing interest in her. Not that he blamed Asha. Cosette was just wonderful and anyone would end up liking her. "Gosh," Cosette could not help but let out a faint when Maxen drew back slightly, leaning his back against the couch. Here she thought Maxen would ravage her lips, only to get disappointed. "Am I becoming lewd?" she wondered. "Does this have anything to do in reading too much smut?" Her shoulders lowered, sighing deeply, sitting in the same spot with her body facing Maxen. She just looked at his side profile, studying him with narrowed eyes. "But Dad already knew about me and Max," she told herself. "He just told me to be careful and get married first before doing the deed, so a kiss is fine, right?" Cosette mulled about it since she became more open to Conrad about her feelings. Conrad was strict, but at the same time, he was trying his best to understand that his daughter was getting older. And as his father, Conrad preferred Cosette to be more open to him by understanding these sorts of things instead of having his daughter confide in other people. When Maxen felt his prolonged gaze on his side, his brows furrowed. He cocked his head back, eyes falling on her. He hummed a questioning tone, snapping her back from her trance. "Anything wrong?" "No," her voice was low, but her expression was oddly relaxed. "It's just that, it's unfair, Max." "You have rewards for doing good, but I don't." She frowned, but the luster in her eyes was clear. Maxen's brows knitted, even more, studying the displeasure on her face. "What sort of reward do you want?" he wondered hesitatingly, listing down of what he could give her as a reward. In his mind, there was nothing to give Cosette anymore aside from kindness and consideration. She had everything she wanted, and she could afford everything that Maxen could and couldn't buy, so he didn't have any idea what sort of reward she wanted. Much to his surprise, Cosette smacked her lips and planted a finger on the bottom of her lips. His eyes narrowed while the corner of her lips hooked up subtly. "A kiss," she remarked without a second hesitation. "In here." Later. For a moment, Maxen's brain went blank, just like his eyes. He looked at her mischievous and sweet smile, eyes shining with clarity and resolution. Her bright eyes were enough to stop him from wondering if he heard her correctly. He did, and she was serious about it. "No," he whispered, making her frown instantly. "What?" "I said no," he repeated under his breath. But her frown continued to deepen, lowering her eyes in disappointment. Just when she thought she could exploit Maxen by doing the same trick he did, she was proven wrong. Maxen had matured so fast. When she looked up at him instead of sadness, all she gave him was a mild glare. "But why Max?" she asked, just to hear the explanation instead of wondering why he was refusing her all night. "That's unfair, you know. I mean, you should at least explain to me why you can't reward me." Her breath hitched when he slowly drew his back from the couch and then pounced on her. Her pupils went huge, blinking twice, processing what just happened. All she could do was stare at his bewitching face hovering over her, holding her wrist to the side, his mouth falling ajar. "It's not that I can't," he clarified under his breath, staring at the confusion plastered on her face. His eyes glinted dangerously, etching how she appeared underneath him. She looked better than how he imagined her in his fantasies. Those lustrous hazel eyes, her narrow nose, and those tender, plump lips just looked even better with the natural blush on her cheeks. He was losing his mind once again. Surely she was the only person who could drive him crazy and throw his rationale out of the window. After all that inner struggle, one word from her and all the defenses he built up crumbled down as if they were made of glass. Cosette bit her inner lip, swallowing down the tension in her throat. "If it's not that you can't, then what?" came out a whisper, finally recovering from the shock of his sudden aggression. "You're not stupid, Cozy," he replied with a rasped voice, having his throat dry up unnaturally so. "You know the reason." "I don't," she denied, letting her stubbornness take over her. "How would I know if you don't tell me?" Maxen let out a deep exhale, holding her clear eyes. She is testing me, he told himself. Why do you always push me on the edge, Cozy? He asked, lowering his body until his weight blanketed her. When his lips were an inch from hers, inhaling her hot breaths, he whispered, You want to know why? Then I'll show you why. Maxen tilted his head and pressed his lips against her, squeezing her wrist upon having a taste of her lips once again. Out of excitement, he bit her lower lips, forcing a faint whimper from her. But that reckless sound that escaped her mouth to his mouth tugged his heartstring until it snapped a string in his head. His lips guided her lips open, sliding his tongue inside carefully. He kept his eyes partially opened as if that would help him retain the remaining rationality in him. However, when his gaze veered to her eyes, he caught her closing her eyes despite that his body was pressing down on her and his lips were claiming her lips. Damn, he cursed internally, deepening his kiss and shutting his eyes to feel more of her. His tongue took hers into a dance, exploring the wonders of her mouth. The taste of mint from her toothpaste still lingered in her mouth, with a tang of corn from the popcorn and a bit of salt. It was a strange combination, but an overall pleasant burst of flavors. Drunk in the plethora of overwhelming euphoria, Maxen adjusted until his knees brushed her leg open. He pressed his body until he could feel her rising heat. Cosette didn't struggle or showed the slightest resistance, but instead, her lips followed his lips clumsily. His hand carefully let her wrist go, moving down to squeeze her hip lightly. At that point, he expected her to freeze or stop him, but Cosette just flinched and accidentally bit his lips mildly. But she didn't resist and continued to move her lips along with him. And so, without using his head, Maxen slipped his hand inside her shirt and felt the outline of her body with his palm. Her skin was just as smooth as it appeared, and her curves were no joke. Her rising body temperature sent electricity on his palm down to his groin. He could feel all the tension in his nether region, giving him a bulge to the point it was painful. He should stop, he thought, squeezing her waist in an attempt to wake her up from the heat of the moment, but alas, she got the wrong signal. Instead of pushing him away just as he wanted, she arched her back and wrapped her limbs around his neck on instinct. Maxen lost it. Shit. Chapter 104, Take It Off. Warning, the chapter contains mature content. Not advisable for AGES 17 and below. When Maxen's face was hovering over her, Cosette instantly understood his reason for refusing. However, in that situation where she was pinned under him while his face paired with that obvious desire in his eyes hovering over her, she couldn't resist the tingling sensation crawling under her skin. Hence, she kept pressing on the matter, feigning ignorant until his lips smashed against hers. Cosette flinched when she felt his grip around her wrist loosen, only to feel his palm on her thigh. However, she liked it. Her body ached to be touched more, allowing him to feel her hips until his hand was on her waist. She shuddered slightly when the chill inbound breeze ran up her navel, but his fervent palm eased her. In her mind, she knew she should stop as they were going further and further than just a normal kiss. But she couldn't stop herself from succumbing to the increasing heat of her body, and this foreign desire she wanted to quench. Her brain felt powerless against her heart and body's primal need. When she felt him squeeze her waist tighter than usual, Cosette instantly knew his hidden message. Maxen wanted her to stop him. He, too, felt powerless against this strong force that was pushing him to touch her while kissing her. He was depending on her, asking for her help to push him away. However, Cosette feigned ignorant at his silent plea and instead wrapped her arms around his neck. She arched her body, allowing her chest to press against his firm ones, deepening their passionate French kiss. She liked it, his lips were intoxicating, and his touch on her bare skin was addicting. The room was chilly, but their backs and bodies were breaking out in sweats. The sounds of their lips echoed in their ears, shunning the screams from the horror film they were supposed to be watching. Hey, he called in between his ragged breathing, keeping his lips on her moist ones, planting a series of brief kisses on her lips. His hand was still inside her shirt, his fingertips brushing the side of her bra. Her body was so hot as if she was running a fever, and so was his body. Stop me, he whispered in her ears, tracing kisses on her sharp jaw down to the side of her neck. But in contrast to his pleas, Cosette stretched her neck to give him better access. Her limbs around his neck loosened, but they stayed clinging to him. Her mouth fell open at his soothing kisses. His lips soothed her feverish body, allowing him to kiss her everywhere he wanted. This was something she never felt before. It felt so foreign, but at the same time she loved it. Perhaps it was because it was Maxen. That was why she didn't mind crossing the line. A part of her thought about how amazing this situation was. How could it not? She and Maxen knew they shouldn't be kissing, but they just kept going. And both of them knew this would go further if none of them get a grip. When Maxen raised his head and claimed her lips once more, he bit her lower lip. His hand then cupped her breast, feeling her laced bra on his palm. A whimper escaped her mouth to his mouth, making him nearly lose his mind as he grasped her breast. This time she bit his lips to signal him he was gripping too hard. Fortunately, he got her signal and slowly loosened his grip. However, that also meant she was allowing him to touch her mounds. "You're driving me crazy," he whispered into her mouth, settling his hand on her breast. Cosette was panting for air as they took a break from kissing before they suffocate each other to death. His hot palm remained on top of her bra, and his forehead was resting on her. She looked at him, and all she saw were his grey eyes that appeared darker than usual. He was watching her at this close distance, observing. She pressed her lips into a thin line, unable to hide her flustered face under his piercing gaze. "What?" she whispered, lowering her eyes. "Don't look at me like that when your hand is literally on my boob." "It's okay," he asked under his breath, his fingertips tracing the upper cup of her bra. Cosette pursed her lips and looked away, nodding. "Do you want to?" "Do you want to?" he returned almost immediately. "This is not a question for me, but for you." Her throat bobbed, biting her inner lower lips. She mustered her courage to look back at him, picturing their position on the couch. Maxen was still on top of her, his knee in between her legs, while her foot was on the floor, the other leg pressed against the backrest of the couch. She could feel his stomach on her nether region, pressing on her from time to time. Her shirt was still on, but because his hand was inside it, her tummy was left bare. "You want me to take responsibility, don't you?" she murmured with a pout, locking her arms around his neck. "I like Maxen's touch." "Really?" He narrowed his eyes and bent lower. Really?" "Just touch?" he asked once more, brushing the apex of his nose against her nose. His lips grazed her tender lips, making him take a gentle bite. When he let her lips go and showered it with soft kisses to his heart's content, Cosette cleared her throat. "Your kisses too," came out a muffled reply, causing the side of his lips to curl up. "Actually, I like Maxen." "You're just saying that because of the situation," he replied, kissing her lips gently and feeling her frown against his lips. His heart felt full at the moment, overwhelmed at the liberty of his hands and lips. He had already lost count of how many times his lips touched her, but neither the overwhelming fervor nor the thought of losing count of their kisses mattered. He felt greedy and he wanted to kiss her more and more. He wanted to put his hands all over her body, kiss every inch and leave his marks. But he wasn't so stupid as to leave a mark to where anyone could see. Conrad would kill him. "Shit," he hissed internally at the thought of Conrad, but that guilt immediately disappeared when she let out a moan in his mouth. Really?" Maxen shut his eyes as he hungrily claimed her lips, pressing his lips. His tongue ventured into her mouth once more, not a bit disgusted at her tongue that was touching his. While he was busy keeping her mouth busy, Maxen carefully pulled down the upper cup of her bra. Feeling his discreet movements, Cosette tightened her grip around his neck. However, she didn't stop him, and he knew that was the go signal. Maxen continued to pull it down until the fabric covering her bosom was underneath her mound. "Damn cozy," he cursed under his breath, cupping her breast without any fabric to protect it. His pants tightened as the tension in his groin continuously increased. He was almost in pain. Hence, he lowered his body, pressing his budge against the junction between her legs. Not to his surprise, the only reaction he got from her was Cosette arching her back. Her mouth fell open as he fondled her breast carefully, shuddering when he pinched her hardened nipple from all that kissing and touching. Seeing how she looked satisfied being touched, Maxen ground his teeth. Until now, everything still felt surreal. He was touching her, not just her hand, but somewhere private. And seeing she enjoyed it just as much as he did, Maxen could not help but lean over and bite her jaw mildly. "Ah, Max," came out a gentle call, almost like a moan. Cosette loosened her embrace and clutched his shoulder when he bit her earlobe next. A giggle slipped past her lips, feeling a bit ticklish at his hot breaths kissing her ear. But then the next second, she was biting her lips as his entire palm grabbed her bare breast. She felt like losing her mind at this point with all the emotions she was going through every second. But, deep in her heart, she wanted more. No, not deep in her heart, but somewhere down there was screaming to get some attention. Only then did Cosette realize Maxen's groin was pressing on it from time to time, dyeing her face with a deeper shade of red. But before she could speak, Maxen whispered in her ear. "Take it off," he bit her ear gently once again, his finger clipping her shirt from underneath. He tugged it lightly and planted more kisses on her jaw and then lips. "Your shirt, let's take it off." For a moment, Cosette's brain went blank. Did he just ask him to take her shirt off? She looked at him with dilated eyes, but Maxen smirked in return. Chapter 105, Making Out. Warning, mature content ahead. not advisable for ages 17 and below. Don't want to, Maxen asked, brushing the tip of his nose against Cosette's cheek. Just say so. No, she whispered, tilting her head at the ticklish sensation crawling under her skin. Max, stop. Then don't take it off. This time she clutched his shoulder tighter, pushing him away lightly. His brows furrowed, tilting his head as if nothing mattered to him right now, aside from fondling her breast and kissing her. His eyelashes fluttered lazily, watching her press her lips in embarrassment. Not that, came out a muffled voice, looking away from him momentarily, only to look back once more. What I mean is, you should be the one taking it off. It's a little embarrassing if I do it myself. Maxen blinked twice, looking at her flustered face. At this point, he couldn't measure the euphoric sensation filling his chest. Cozy, do you know what I'll do if you take your clothes off? He asked out of plain curiosity, waiting for her to look back at him. Once I took it off, I'll take off your bra too until there's nothing to protect your chest. I know that. I'll look at them, he added, watching her face flush in a deeper shade of red. Cosette gulped and looked back at him, this time without looking away. Sure. It's fine, he asked, and she nodded mildly. A shallow breath slipped past his lips, pushing himself away until he was standing on his knees. Maxen looked down at her from her hips, going up to her exposed tummy, and then to her beach-red face. His mouth fell open at the sight of her. Did she have any idea how far they had gone? His eyelids drooped as his gaze lingered on the luster in her eyes. I want her so bad. His thick eyelashes failed to conceal the desire that flickered across his eyes. He knew it was wrong, and they were too young for this. However, it was not like he would go as far as to make love to her. Just make out, he told himself. He bent over once again, but instead of his face landing directly on her lips, he went lower to the hem of her shirt. Without a word, Maxen bit the hem of her shirt and pulled it up until her entire stomach was showing. While doing so, he kept his eyes on her. She was watching him, gulping at his action, and shuddering at the chill inbound breeze that caressed her skin. You look excited, he teased, making her look away instantly. I'm not, she denied with a huff, hearing him chuckle. Cozy, Maxen moved his face upward, using his fingertip to guide her jaw to make her face him. Don't look away. He kissed her once more, this time more comfortably in claiming her lips. They had been kissing for over 10 minutes now, and his lips felt slightly numb, but that wasn't enough to stop him from kissing her more, but she still frowned under his lips. Stop teasing me, Max, she complained, causing the side of his to stretch from ear to ear. I'm sorry, I was in the wrong, he surrendered, biting her lips gently, afraid her lips also felt numb. As his light kisses grew longer until they were locked in a passionate kiss once more, Maxen carefully pulled the hem of her shirt. When it reached her armpit, he parted his lips from her to take off her shirt. Cosette changed her top earlier, from a sleeveless top to a bigger tee. If they only knew this would escalate to this point, he would have asked her not to change clothes. That one she was wearing previously was easier to take off. Actually, she didn't need to take it off as he would only slip the strap down her shoulder. But well, Cosette raised her arms up while he took it off. As soon as her shirt left her arms, Maxen simply draped it over the backrest of the couch. He stood on his knees to get a better look, causing her to shield her bosom with her arms. Maxen didn't complain, though, nor did he demand. All he did was stare at her while she was covering her mounds with her arm. Under those arms, he caught the upper cup of her bra over her arm, while the other only showed her upper chest. The latter was the one he had fondled, and the strap of her bra had already fallen off her shoulder. She's hot, he thought, in disbelief at the naked glory right before his eyes. Maxen unconsciously licked his lips, moving his hands to her arms. His lips curled up when she bit her lips in reluctance, but still didn't fight him when he spread her arms to the side to show him what she was hiding. After his eyes landed on the pink nipple, his arousal shot up to the roof. His hand left a mark around it as her skin was as white as milk. Her other bosom was still covered, and without thinking twice, Maxen hooked the cup covering her other mound. He pulled it down until it bounced out for his eyes to ogle. That second, his brain buzzed, and all he could think was to touch and suck them. They looked so delectable, but instead of making his mouth water, it made it dry up. Cozy, he called under his breath, reaching for her breast until both his hands were cupping them. As soon as he did, he snapped his eyes at her as she let out a faint whimper. Cosette was covering her lips with the back of her hand, eyes watery but clear. She was looking back at him, noticing how his eyes appeared like those intoxicated men who could barely control themselves. She nearly gasped as Maxen pinched her nipple, rubbing them gently in between his thumb and index. Her body shuddered and flinched, tightening the knots in her stomach. Her legs closed slightly, turning her head at the ecstasy traveling through the ends of her nerves. Maxen observed her reaction and how her body reacted with just a slight pinch of her nipple. His eyes grew darker and darker, his brain clouded with nothing but the thought of wanting her. He wanted to see her and hear her whimper more. So without a moment's notice, Maxen bent over once more. This time, instead of kissing her lips, Maxen's lips landed on her collarbones. He nibbled them carefully, taking his precious time biting, kissing, and sucking, slowly making his way down to her bosom. But just as he was around her mound, Maxen stopped and gazed up. His lips curled up as soon as he caught her gaze, sticking his tongue out and letting her see how the tip of his tongue touched the end of her hardened nipple. She gasped and flinched, clutching his shoulder on instinct. "Max," she whispered through her gritted teeth, breathing heavily, but other than that, she said nothing further. Maxen raised his other hand and caressed her cheek with his thumb, before opening his mouth and keeping her teat in between his teeth. Her mouth instantly fell open, shuddering every time his tongue flicked against her teat. His other hand had already left her face to fondle her other breast. Another moan escaped her mouth, causing her to cover her mouth from the sensation that was forcing her to moan. But Maxen seemed to love it as he pressed his thumb on her other nipple, massaging it in a circular motion. "Ah," came out a muffled moan, covering her lips to keep the embarrassing sound at the minimum. She pressed her palm harder when Maxen moved to the other, kissing and sucking her other breast while fondling the other. The saliva he left on the other breast made her body tingle as his finger massaged it smoothly. For minutes, Cosette tried her best to muffle her moans while he sucked and French kissed her breast with equal attention. After some time, Maxen placed both his hands on the side of her bosom, pushing them together until her mounds were squeezed together, making it easier for him to lick them. "I think I'm going crazy," she thought, panting for air. The simulation was already making her out of breath, unable to discern what she was feeling at the moment. However, one distinct feeling remained dominant. She wanted more. Cosette didn't know what sort of more it was, but subconsciously she exactly knew what she wanted. Her lady down there was hot and wet. To prove this theory, she wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling his body down until his bulge was pressing against her. "Max," she whispered in between her ragged breathing. As if sensing what she wanted, Maxen let go of her teat, only to claim her lips right after. "I feel super hot," she confessed in his mouth, inducing a rasped hum from him. "I know," he answered, kissing her lips while his hand caressed her body down to her navel. His hand didn't even linger on her short belt, as he slipped it inside to relieve what was making her desperate right now. Chapter 106, Because It's Max. Warning: the chapter contains matured content, not advisable for ages 17 and below. Cosette had never ever thought of having to stand bare in front of someone, let alone allowing someone else to touch her. But alas, she felt no sense of shame when his hand slipped inside her shorts. She only felt relief when his fingers glided down to her wet folds. Her mouth fell open while he rested his forehead against hers. She was soaking wet, and everything he was touching right now felt as soft as tofu. Cosette arched her back, making her rear press against the cushion, and as a result, his finger slid deeper. "Max," she moaned, feeling his finger massage her clitoris in a slow, circular motion. Cosette wrapped her arms around his neck once more, lifting her head to initiate a kiss. Cosette felt intoxicated and high with the manic ecstasy overtaking her. It was too much, and she couldn't think straight anymore. All she could think about was her throbbing core and his touches, desiring something so bad as if it would kill her if she wouldn't get it. Meanwhile, Maxen hungrily devoured her lips, overwhelmed by her hunger. He was touching her, not just her bosom, but even her flower and pearl. Just like her, Maxen slowly lost his rationality as his emotion peaked. He just told himself he would make out with her, but he wouldn't push further than that. But the situation, their bodies, and the maddening desire made it impossible for him to recall that fragile promise. Without thinking twice, Maxen pulled his hand out, only to unbutton her shorts to touch her freely. He wanted her, and he knew Cosette wanted the same as him. However, just as Maxen was about to pull down her shorts to see all her naked glory, both of them froze at the voices coming from outside. Both of them looked at each other, wide-eyed. It was as though someone splashed them with cold water, as they were unable to move for a second. When the adrenaline kicked in, Maxen pushed himself away while Cosette instinctively grabbed her shirt resting over the backrest. Everything happened so fast, with Maxen back to his original spot in the corner of the couch while Cosette sat up. Fortunately, Maxen didn't toss her shirt away, and she was able to slip inside her loose tee. "Young miss, I brought the snacks you requested." Lucia's voice came in just 1 second after the two of them sat down in their original position. Lucia smiled, seeing that the two of them were watching silently. She barely made a sound, entering the theatre room while carrying a tray full of foods Cosette asked the chef to make and bake. When Lucia reached the front row to serve the tray of dishes, her brows rose. She darted her eyes between the two, noticing their pale complexion and the traumatized looks plastered on their faces. Lucia then glanced at the screen, seeing that the movie had already ended and had shown the movie title after the list of names. "Is the movie that scary, young miss?" She chuckled, jumping to her own conclusion, knowing Cosette was easily terrified. Thus, her young miss wasn't fond of horror movies. Cosette's voice fell short, snapping her eyes at Lucia. She laughed awkwardly, nodding. "Yes, it was quite too much. Too much blood, right, Max?" Maxen blinked twice and rocked his head. "Yes." Unlike Cosette, Maxen was quick to get a grip and act naturally. He leaned back, propping his elbow against the armrest. Maxen glanced at her and bit his finger slightly, watching the horror on her face upon recognizing it was the finger he used to massage her pearl. "You should try to watch something else," Lucia happily advised, straightening her back and darting her eyes between the two of them. "But watching something else isn't so bad with a company." Cosette cleared her throat, ignoring Maxen's sly actions. She faced Lucia and smiled brightly, huffing. "Young miss, are you all right?" asked Lucia after getting a good look at Cosette's face and noticing how her face seemed all red. "Yes, I was just a little flustered at all the jump scares, but I'm all right." Cosette cleared her throat once again, adjusting the pillow on her lap to hide her unbuttoned shorts. "Anyway, is Dad home?" "I think he will be late tonight." Cosette pondered about it and rocked her head. "Right, he will be on a business trip today and he will return tomorrow." "I'm sure he will return home as soon as he can. Anyway, do you need anything else, young miss?" Lucia asked with a smile, since Cosette told them she would celebrate Maxen's certification. Hence, since it was just the two of them, Lucia hoped they would have fun. If only Lucia knew how she disturbed the fun. Cosette pretended to gloss her eyes over the food, but her brain was still trying to recover. She then shook her head before flashing Maxen a smile. "Do you need anything else, Max?" "Condom," his brain immediately replied, but he simply shrugged. "That's all, Nanny Lucia." She faced Lucia with a sweet smile. "Thank you." "All right, just call the telephone in the lobby if you need anything else." Lucia's smile broadened. "Everyone wants you and Sir Max to have a good time since you've worked hard all summer." "Thanks. Have fun." Lucia bowed at Cosette and then at Maxen before she sauntered off. Cosette looked back and smiled at Lucia when the latter looked back before closing the door. When the door closed, Cosette let out a sharp breath and patted her chest. "That was close," she muttered, catching up to her breathing, eyes closed. That was truly closed. If Lucia wasn't the type to make a sound, her nanny would be mortified at the scene she would come to. Meanwhile, Maxen watched her pat her chest. Unlike her, who was scared out of her wits about Lucia, Maxen was more frustrated. But well, Lucia just unknowingly gave the youths the break they didn't have. Still, he was still hard and looking at her. Everything that had happened felt like a dream. Biting his finger slightly, Maxen licked it. His brows rose at the strange flavor that he couldn't describe in words, but what he was certain was that it tasted pleasant. That was the proof he touched her somewhere no one else had, and that sheer thought caused his groin to grow harder to the point it was already painful. "Oh goodness," Cosette let out another deep exhale, raising a brow upon sensing his gaze. She turned her head to face him, watching him still biting a finger while looking at her up and down. "That was close," she repeated, to get some sort of reaction from him. Was she the only one who felt the dread of being found out? "That was close, indeed." He raised his brows, giving her this knowing look at the double meaning of his reply. "Almost." Cosette and Maxen looked at each other in silence before they chuckled at the same time. Maxen stretched his hand on the space between them, tapping it as he leaned back comfortably on the couch. "Come here, Cozy." He tapped the couch lightly once more, smirking triumphantly when she crawled her way to him. "Max," Cosette let out a sigh as soon as she was sitting beside him, facing him squarely. "I was scared out of my wits. Do you think someone will come again?" "Yes," he nodded, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Someone will definitely come." "Then why are you?" Her eyes popped open while the side of his lips stretched from ear to ear. Cosette slapped his shoulder and glared at him. "That's lewd." Maxen chuckled, slipping his hand inside her shirt to caress her back. She simply flinched but said nothing about it, as if that had become normal to them now. Looking at her glare, his eyes softened. Without thinking twice, his hand that was settling on her back pulled her close, and before she knew it, Maxen had embraced her tightly. For a moment, Cosette froze, looking down at him as he secured his arm around her. Max, she whispered, relaxing her body as she slowly rested her arms over his shoulders and stroked his hair gently. Maxen moved his head until his nose was touching her neck. His eyes were soft while his hands crawled around her slender frame, as if he was holding on to his dear life. "Why didn't you stop me?" he asked under his breath, feeling her back with his palm that was slipped inside her loose top. "If Lucia didn't come, do you have any idea what we could be doing now?" Cosette lowered her eyes and bit her inner lips slightly. I do. And it was fine. It was fine. Why? Maxen slowly drew his head back to see what sort of expression she was wearing. As soon as he did, Cosette didn't bear any emotion aside from her determined eyes. "Because it's Maxen," she answered in a soft voice, sporting a subtle smile and cupping his cheek. "Everything that I do and every decision that I make that includes you are something I will never regret, even if others say it's not proper." Cosette brushed his lean cheek and studied his lean face carefully. He might have lost a lot of weight, but he was still Maxen. He was still her villain. "I wasn't joking when I said I missed you, Max," she whispered as she leaned down. Cosette paused when their distance was only half a palm length away. "I missed you so terribly bad I can kiss you all night." The second the last syllable of her sentiments escaped her lips, Cosette tilted her head and planted a kiss on his lips. Chapter 107, His Promise. "I missed you so terribly bad I can kiss you all night." The second the last syllable of her sentiments escaped her lips, Cosette tilted her head and planted a kiss on his lips. Maxen closed his eyes ever so slowly, basking in the sweetness and hotness of her lips conquering his. His heart was racing so fast, but the warmth of her body embracing him soothed all the tension in every fiber of his body. Her words were akin to a chord that struck a string in his heart, and he just couldn't stop himself from falling deeper and deeper. When their lips parted, they were both panting for air. She rested her head on his forehead, still cupping his cheek, smiling subtly. Unlike their fervent and desperate primal need, their heart just felt full at the moment. It felt like they magically didn't need to go as far as to have sex just to express their hearts. The contentment with each other's presence and warmth were already enough. "Don't break me, Cozy," he whispered with his eyes closed, reopening them ever so tenderly. "Don't break me." Cosette pressed her lips into a thin line and nodded mildly. "I promise." His eyes softened, drawing his head back to take a better look at her face. He cupped her cheek lovingly, brushing her cheek with his thumb. There were many things he wanted to tell her, but only those words he uttered successfully escaped the cage in his throat. Don't break him, because if Cosette turned out to be just playing with him, it would kill him. Cosette was his salvation. She was his moon in the silent, cold night. He would do anything for her, and all he was asking in return was to not break him in the worst way possible. "Just promise me one thing, Max." Cosette cleared her throat, taking her precious time to continue what she wanted to say. "Be good, always." Maxen didn't respond and simply looked at her in silence. Now that he thought about it, Cosette had always made him promise about this over and over. Not that he was a terrible human being, but deep in his heart, he didn't mind being the devil who would bring forth an inferno in this world if he were capable enough to do so. Still, the intrigue remained. "Why do you always ask me to be good?" he asked as he wanted clarity. "Do you perceive me as a terrible person capable of murder?" "No," she shook her head, reaching for his hand and squeezing them mildly. As she did, Maxen furrowed his brow at the slight tremor in her hands. "I just do not want to lose you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she exhaled sharply. "I just want us to be normal, Max. We enjoy our youth and live without a care. If what the future holds isn't what we planned then, at least we enjoyed the present and might change our future. We might not be the lead of this story, but at least we also get our happy ending," she added without a thought whether that may sound a bit random. Fortunately, Maxen didn't react and just stared at her in silence. Cosette allowed him to take his time to absorb her vague explanation. While waiting for his promise, she stared at him, and for some reason her heart tightened. The feeling in her heart felt familiar, but at the same time it felt alien. It was as though she had these feelings all along, but she only realized them now. It wasn't something that made her feel in love. The feeling leaned more on regret, sadness, and longing. And because of that, she only realized tears had already pooled in her eyes when they stained her cheek. "Oh," Cosette touched her cheek, checking her hand to see clear liquid on them. It took her by surprise. She didn't know why she was crying at this moment, but she couldn't also stop her tears. "Why are you crying?" he asked worriedly, wiping her tears with his thumb. "I'll be good, you don't need to cry." "Haha, no, it's not that." She chuckled, feeling a bit silly at the tears she was shedding. "Then what is it?" he queried once more, getting more worried as her tears wouldn't stop. Cosette kept forcing a laugh while wiping her tears, but it wouldn't stop until she was hiccuping. She hiccuped, finding the right words to explain the tears. I'm just very happy and I can't stop my tears. Maury like she was very happy and relieved at something she couldn't understand. Cosette was certain this wasn't about changing the villain's fate, but something else. Something that her heart sheltered, but she just couldn't remember what it was exactly. Me too, Maxen carefully wrapped his arms around her and pulled her into his embrace. I am beyond happy, Cozy. I can't even find the right words for it. Maxen rubbed her back while she cried in his embrace. Silence befell their shoulders as she cried until she was hiccuping, while he kept her in his embrace, consoling her. One way or another, Maxen somehow understood her tears. He was relieved to have met her and grateful for her existence. She was the only good thing in this world, and without her, this world was just grey. Little did he know, her reason was entirely different, but also uncannily similar, which Cosette hadn't figured out just yet, and it would take some time before she would understand why she had loved Maxen even before. The two of them consoled each other until she recovered. Once Cosette stopped crying, they both decided to watch a film properly. This time, however, Cosette was watching with her head on his lap while he casually stroked her hair gently. The arousal they felt lingered in their heart, but they silently agreed to preserve this moment without doing something unholy anymore. As the night fell deeper and they were in the third movie, Maxen gazed down. A chuckle escaped his mouth upon seeing she had nodded off. She cried a lot, so he couldn't blame her that she had fallen asleep. Maxen continued to stroke her soft hair, reaching for the remote control with his other hand to lower the volume. He wanted to enjoy this moment, even though his hips were still in pain. But his heart felt like it would burst with all sorts of emotions. He paused, watching her deep breaths. His eyes softened as the side of his lips curled up. Love you. Maxen had a promise that night 2 months ago. When Cosette told him she would tag along with Conrad, it was akin to a tight slap on his face. Cosette might just be there around him, but she was still out of his reach. She was well born to boot, and her future was sealed. Seeing her work hard the past 2 months made him realize Cosette would be busier once she took over the BLK Corporation. They were young now, and they didn't have other worries the adults usually faced. Although Maxen was no stranger to the cruel reality, he still had to acknowledge the fact his life greatly differed from hers. In the future, Cosette would meet more people. She would meet capable and elite men, and as beautiful, smart, and rich as Cosette, men would line up for her. Luke might not be a threat now, but Asher Quinn was. It wasn't that Maxen was competing, but whether or not he wanted it, he had to. Therefore, he attended tons of classes, not just for the betterment of his physical body and secured mental health, but for his future as well. He pledged to be better, to have a fighting chance despite his humble beginnings. The life of the rich, the filthy rich, wasn't easy. Conrad had already proved that to Maxen, and her father's mentality had already shown an example of how powerful people could do. Although Conrad only gave him an example whenever he had time to spare with Maxen, Maxen wasn't stupid to understand that Conrad could be cunning and take advantage of people if he so pleased. It was a scary world, and in this world she lived in, he had to become the best of the best. She might not ask him to be the best of the best, but he still wanted to if he wanted to protect her and stand proudly beside her. After all, Maxen had already set his future with Cosette in it. It might be the future that she was his wife, as that was impossible for him to assume before what happened today, but just someone who would always be a part of his life. His life. He owed it to Cosette, and after what happened earlier, his ambition grew from a friend to have her as his wife. Looking at her, who was sleeping soundlessly on his lap, he smiled, no matter how scary her world was. The sight of her eased all that fear. He loved her, and she was worth it. I'll marry you someday, he whispered, bending over so she could hear his voice even in her dreams. I promise, I'll make you my wife someday. Chapter 108, Maxen Devilsin. Time passed, and Maxen decided to take Cosette to bed. The servants were aware of their close relationship, so when Lucia saw him carrying her back to her room, she helped him. With Lucia's help, Maxen reached Cosette's room without any mishap and laid her down on the bed carefully. When he tucked her in, a smile resurfaced on his face. He stood on the side of the bed, eyes fixed on her peaceful, sleeping face. Staring at her, he couldn't help but caress her face while Lucia left to do something. As he did so, his brows creased as she moaned and turned to her side, clutching his hand tightly. Is she dreaming? He trailed off when a tear rolled down her temple, making him wonder what sort of dream could make her cry in her sleep. Was it a bad dream? He wondered, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Cosette didn't wake up, just clutching to him as if in an attempt to hold onto him now, which she couldn't in her dreams. Have you had enough of staring? Cosette chuckled as the dashing man she had rolled with under the sheet all night broke his silence. He snapped his eyes ever so slowly, setting them at her. She was lying on her side, propping her knuckles against her temple, while the man leaning against the headboard felt no shame in parading his muscled top. Not yet, came out a seductive voice, smirking as soon as her eyes locked with his. Allow me to look at you more. The dashing man chuckled at the beauty, looking back at him teasingly. She was beautiful, and there was no doubt about that. Any man would get a boner with just a sight of her. A penny for your thoughts, he asked, out of plain curiosity. She had always been the woman whose train of thoughts kept leaving a question in his head. They had shared several nights of passion, and she was one of the reasons he was back in this country, but until now, their relationship was stuck in being fuck buddies. Not that they brought it up, nor did he feel like taking this relationship to another level. He was satisfied with their setup. Among all women he slept with, she was someone who never left his mind. Other women would ask him things such as love, attention, or affection, but she. Cosette Blac, the woman who had beauty, wealth, and a very delectable body and wits, never asked for such things from him. She hummed and smiled seductively. I was thinking how it would be if you and I take this to another level. He arched a brow, a bit surprised at this sudden remark. Do you want us to date officially? Haha, no, but I was thinking it would be nice if we do, she answered truthfully. I wonder if you and I are capable of love. Would our relationship progress like how lovers do? What do you think, Mr. Devilsin? How many times do I need to tell you to call me Max? Like how you scream my name every time I'm inside you. Cosette chuckled. The only fun I get whenever you're not inside me is frustrating you. The man, Maxen, looked at her with a somber look in his eyes. One of the many things why he couldn't stop this relationship with her was that she was different. She just knew how to make him crave for more and give him simple challenges such as how they would address each other. So, she raised a brow, grinning mischievously at him. What do you think if you aren't a criminal while I am? A little bit humane. What do you think about how this relationship plays out? Boring, Cosette broke out in laughter at his blunt reply. We would be just like those boring couples who grow weak in the name of the fucking thing they call love. Maxen smirked as she laughed, smirking. Come here, my boring love. Let's try to be boring for an hour. He crawled to her, pushing her shoulder mildly, which immediately caused her to lie flat on the bed. His lips stretched from ear to ear as he hovered over her beautiful face. You always have the silliest thoughts, Miss Black, came out a rasped voice, feeling his throat dry up as soon as he planted his palm on her hip. You always make me wonder what sort of thought would cross that brain of yours. I need to leave a deep impression. I don't want to become just one of those playthings you fuck and forget the next day. She winked, crawling her arms over his shoulder. You definitely succeeded in that. He smacked his lips, lowering his face to claim her lips. After nibbling her lips, he moved on to trace her sharp jaw with kisses down to the side of her neck. I have a meeting in 2 hours, she whispered with a deep exhale, feeling his hand caress her breast as his lips moved down to them. Cancel it. I can't, Cosette exhaled deeply when he stopped kissing her chest to look at her face. We already did it all night, and I barely slept. Do you wish for me to fail? Honestly, he smirked evilly. Yes, in that case you'll beg me to fund you. That would be a sight to behold. She rolled her eyes and clicked her tongue. I hate you. I didn't say there's something to like about me. He shrugged indifferently. So, your meeting is in 2 hours. Yes. Then we have 2 hours of fucking. His lips stretched from ear to ear until his eyes were squinting. Cosette groaned, but she didn't show any sign that she didn't want to. Maxen had been a great company, and he was her sweet escape. Come on, he whispered in her ears, and before she could understand what he meant, Cosette let out a shriek as he carried her out of the bed. Her eyes shook, clutching his toned shoulder while he stood bare. What are you doing? She exclaimed, slapping his shoulder. Put me down. You said you have 2 hours before your meeting, and it always takes you around that time to prepare. He fluttered his eyes almost innocently. I'm taking you to shower, or do you? Want to enter your office reeking of my semen? I don't mind sending you while you reek of me. Oh, her brows rose as her frown was instantly replaced with a cunning smile. I smell jealousy from you, Mr. Devilsin. I get a bit territorial on the things I claim. I'm not your property. His smirk grew wicked. I never said you had a say in it. Cosette rolled her eyes while he carried her to the bathroom, where they shared a round of passion under the shower. Once they both satisfied each other's needs, they dipped in the warm tub to soothe the tension in their muscles. Maxen was leaning against the curve of the tub, keeping her in between his legs while she leaned her back against him. You usually cancel things when you're with me, saying you and your company are more important than the other party. He broke the silence between them, caressing her body under the water. He traced her shoulder with the apex of his nose, eyes closed, pulling her body closer as if to signal her to stay. Is this meeting more important than you? Not really, she crooned, holding his hand that was wrapped around her waist underneath the water. But I'm meeting with the Quins. Maxen stopped and arched a brow, looking at her side profile. Asher Quinn. I heard a lot about him. He rocked his head, causing her brows to raise. Cosette carefully unhooked his arms around her to face him. You heard a lot about him, she repeated. There was no surprise if this man Maxen knew influential people with his background. However, she picked up the sudden interest in his tone, which sounded trouble. Oh, what is this? He cocked his head to the side, studying the intrigue in her eyes. Don't tell me you like this man. And if I do, jealous. My male ego is fragile, Cosette, so yes, a little. Cosette bit her lower lip before she chuckled. I don't like him in that way. She raised her hand from under the water and massaged his shoulders. Asher Quinn is an intelligent man. Not only he is handsome, but he also had many achievements growing up. The Quinn holdings had progressed significantly with him holding the helm. Even back in the academy, his name had always been compared to mine, and it was the greatest insult. I hold grudges. She smiled. He is mine, Maxen Devilsin. Don't touch him. His eyelids drooped while studying the smirk on her face. You know me more than anyone, Cosette Blac. He tucked a portion of her hair behind her ear tenderly. And that same goes for me. I know you from inside and out. He lowered his head and smirked evilly, holding her gaze with a look in his eyes that could send a chill down her spine. Don't let me come after him. You know what I'm capable of. Chapter 109, The Future or the Past, A Memory or a Dream. Gasp! Cosette panted for air as she sprung up after waking from a long dream. She clutched her chest tightly and touched her face when she felt tears staining it. She had a dream like she always had. Usually, Cosette would wake up feeling groggy and confused every time she woke up from her dreams. However, she would usually forget what it was about and go on with her day. She almost got used to it that Cosette put little thought into them. But now, she could remember some details in her dream last night. They were so clear to her that she was in disbelief. She could remember rolling under the sheet with the older Maxen, kissing and smiling, acting like lovers despite not having a clearer label. The feeling she felt in those dreams, how her heart fluttered at his low chuckles, how her body burned with his touches, and how she felt within his embrace. Cosette could feel the guilty pleasure in them and this pain in her heart. Max, she whispered, her lips quivering. What is going on? Cosette wiped her tears with the back of her fist, but her eyes wouldn't stop shedding them. This sadness again, she thought. This sadness that she felt that one time she woke up after dreaming of herself writing in her journal. Why? Cosette hugged her knees, a little bit fearful that the dream snippets of her dreams lingered in her head. Was this because she made out with Maxen? But why was Maxen called Maxen Devilsin? With all the changes she did until this point, there was no way Maxen would go back to that kind of life. Also, why did she look so sad even though her heart fluttered just looking at him? Am I failing? She wondered, believing those memories were probably just some dream she would probably have in the future. After all, there was not a point in the novel where it was written that Maxen and Cosette had some sort of connection. Although they both appeared in Volume 2, that was just how the novel happened to thicken the plot right. A love rival for the male lead, and the female lead's love rival. I think I'm going crazy, she whispered, hugging herself tighter. Cosette succumbed to fear for a couple of minutes as she pondered about the strange dream and the pain in her heart that brought tears to her eyes. After some time, her brows rose as she looked around, realizing she was back in her room. How? She trailed off, remembering fighting her sleep while watching a film with Maxen, but it seemed she had fallen asleep. Did he carry me here? She wondered before her eyes softened as her lips curled up subtly. I bet he will complain later. Cosette reached for the empty side of the bed and felt it with her palm, wondering what happened when she had fallen asleep. Did he stay longer? What sort of expression did he wear as he laid her down? Was he annoyed about making him carry her? Things like that crossed her head, imagining what happened last night and how she ended up back in her bed. That's impossible, she murmured after some time, nodding encouragingly. I'm probably just overthinking. Maxen will not become a criminal and I won't be that lonely. After looking around, Cosette convinced herself she was simply overthinking. She believed it was simply her fear that the novel would still follow the natural course of the characters. I'm rewriting it and the author can just cry, she huffed, recomposing herself and convincing herself the plot shouldn't bother her anymore. Cosette exhaled sharply once again and put her fist up to cheer herself. Since the clock just hit 6 in the morning and Cosette had no plans for the entire week before the class starts, she decided to review the changes she had done since the beginning. Cosette hurriedly went to her desk and grabbed her journal, hiding it in the locked drawer. As soon as she saw her own handwriting, "My life with my baby villain," her eyes softened. She caressed it affectionately, smiling at it, somehow giving this warmth in her heart. "It feels like, I don't know," she whispered, but the sense of relief and satisfaction just by looking at those words swelled in her chest. Cosette stared at it for a long time before turning the page. On the first page, Cosette read the summary of the novel she wrote when she first came into this world. She remained silent as she kept reading and turning the page. The more she read, the more she realized that the next several pages weren't part of the novel. Actually, more than half of the content in her daily journal was all her daily entry lest the real Cosette returned, so she wouldn't get confused by the changes in her life. She didn't realize how happy the words she wrote down herself until she was reading them again. "That's right," she whispered. "It's impossible for Maxen and Cosette Blac to become the villainess and villain." She rocked her head, convinced at her first argument she was simply overthinking. After all, the entries in this daily journal were loads of fun, memorable and warm memories Cosette would cherish forever. Even though there were entries she would diss Maxen, and even Asher and Mia, the entries were full of life that even though Cosette was the person who wrote them, could not help but think whoever wrote these silly entries had a fun, eventful life. "Now, before I forget them," Cosette recomposed herself as she flipped the journal to write on the last page. She didn't want to ruin the daily journal by adding something in between. Moreover, it was good to keep things organized. With that thought in mind, Cosette started jotting down the dreams she had last night. She even added the words she told Maxen and what he told her in those dreams. Although it was just snippets, she also placed bullets in some scenarios of that dream. Cosette tried to recall the previous dreams, but to no avail. She couldn't remember them, so she focused on what she remembered. "Fuck buddies," she mumbled, clicking her tongue while shaking her head. "That's impossible." Her face froze when she recalled the steamy kisses last night. Now that she was sobered, her face dyed red the more she recalled what happened. Max touched my. She covered her lips with her palm, wanting to slam her forehead against the desk out of embarrassment. How am I going to face him now? Cosette's dilemma came a bit late since she was fine last night, but she blamed it on the moment and the high emotions between them. "Now that I think about it, what are we now?" she asked herself, racking her brain while her body was frozen on the spot. This time, Cosette hit her forehead on top of the journal. "I don't know what's the status between us now." Cosette grunted, resting her head over her arms that were bent on the desk. "I should have made it clear last night. It's too embarrassing to face him now, knowing he touched." She winced at the memory of how his hands slipped inside her shirt and fondled her breast. But the most embarrassing was Maxen touched her lady down there. She didn't feel embarrassed while in the moment, but now, she felt like staying in her room all day to avoid him. Just as Cosette was wallowing, she noticed the digital clock on the desk was not in the right position. Her brows creased, reaching for it to put it back in place since it bothered her. But as soon as she did, a memory or one of her dreams came back to her. "Stop touching my things, Mr. Devilsin." Cosette crossed her arms, watching Maxen in a dashing suit look around her room, not the one in the Black residence but her own place, and was touching things. When he straightened his back and looked back at her, wearing a cunning smirk, she rolled her eyes. "You always do this to me, seriously," she grumbled, stomping her feet to the desk near his vantage point to arrange the frame in its rightful place. As soon as she did, she halted when she felt his warmth from behind her and a hand stopping her from fixing the frame to how she wanted it. "This is a bad habit," he whispered, crawling his arm around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I barely moved it. You shouldn't get bothered by it." "Don't blame me," she cast him a side-eye, unbending to his argument. "Don't let this control you anymore." Her brows rose and twisted her head to look at him better, only to see Maxen staring at the picture frame of her and her father. "You are always so obsessed with being so organized and seeing things in their original position. Let it go." "You," Cosette pursed her lips, biting her lips. "I can't." Maxen glanced at her and rocked his head. He didn't say anything and just let her hand go, but only to move the frame a centimeter for her. "Happy now?" He cocked his head and smirked. "Chem," her lips curled up, looking at the frame in its rightful place. "Looks better now."
And